Chapter 1. Denied at the Gate. The Zanari military base, the impenetrable heart of the Zanari homeworld, was a place known throughout the galaxy. It loomed over the barren desert landscape like a metallic mountain, its dark alloy walls absorbing and reflecting the harsh sunlight of the twin suns overhead. Security drones hovered overhead, their lenses whirring as they surveyed the barren plain stretching in all directions. No human had ever been allowed past its gates. Those who tried were either sent away or never heard from again. Lieutenant Ethan Drake stood alone in the shadow of the base's massive entrance, feeling the simmering heat of the desert burn against his skin. His starship, a small and agile stealth vessel that bore the mark of the Galactic Alliance, had landed just beyond the perimeter of the base, now locked in place by the base's electromagnetic barriers. It was a daring move and unsanctioned landing on hostile territory, but his orders were clear. The urgency of his mission outweighed the risk. Clad in the lightweight armor of a reconnaissance unit, his figure was dwarfed by the looming metallic walls that extended for miles in each direction. The only point of entry was the gate directly in front of him, a thick, reinforced door covered in alien glyphs that glowed with a faint, eerie light. He adjusted the collar of his dark navy uniform, the insignia of the Galactic Alliance, a golden star encircled by a silver halo catching the fading light. His breath steadied as he approached the only barrier between him and the Zanari High Council. There she was, Commander Lasara, the Zanari base's chief security officer. Her posture was rigid, her emerald green combat armor covering her imposing frame. Her expression was as cold as the crystalline glaciers of her species' northern continent, and her eyes, a bright and unsettling shade of yellow, bore into him with barely concealed disdain. "Human, state your business," she commanded, her voice echoing off the metal and stone around them. Ethan took a deep breath. He knew this wouldn't be easy. "I'm Lieutenant Ethan Drake of the Galactic Alliance," he said, his tone steady and respectful. "I've been tasked with delivering a message of utmost importance to the Zanari High Council." Lasara's gaze narrowed, and her pale blue skin seemed to take on a darker hue in the shade of her helmet's visor. "No humans are allowed inside this facility. Our protocols are clear. Whatever message you carry can be delivered through official diplomatic channels, and it certainly does not require your presence here." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had expected resistance, but the urgency of the mission pressed heavily on his shoulders. "This isn't a standard diplomatic message, Commander. It's a matter of critical importance for both our people. I was given explicit instructions that it had to be delivered by hand by me directly to your High Council. I can't leave until it's done." The Zanari guard remained unmoved, her grip tightening around the hilt of the energy blade at her side. "You misunderstand, Lieutenant. You will leave, or I will remove you myself." Ethan swallowed hard, his gaze never wavering. He reached into the pouch at his side, moving slowly so as not to trigger any response from the clearly tense commander. From the pouch, he pulled out a small, rectangular piece of old-fashioned paper, sealed with wax bearing the official emblem of the Galactic Alliance. He held it out, his movements deliberate. "Please," he said, his voice almost a whisper, "just read the message. I promise you'll understand why I'm here." Lasara didn't move. Her eyes flicked to the note, then back to his face, a flicker of confusion flashing across her normally stoic features. She was silent for a long moment before speaking, each word cold and precise. "Drop it. Step back. Now." Ethan did as she commanded, carefully placing the note on the ground before stepping back several paces, his eyes never leaving hers. The desert wind, hot and dry, swept between them, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Lasara's face was a mask of suspicion and contempt. "You think a mere note will grant you access to our most secure location?" she scoffed, her voice a mixture of disdain and incredulity. "You overestimate your position, human. I will not be swayed by your empty threats or promises." Ethan didn't flinch. He had anticipated her reaction, but the note was not an ordinary message, it was a last resort, a final plea. "I'm not asking for favors, Commander," he said firmly. "I'm asking for a chance to prevent a catastrophe." She stepped forward, her tall frame casting a long shadow over the note. Slowly, she crouched down, her armored gauntlet hovering over the piece of paper as if she expected it to burn her skin. Hesitantly, her fingers closed around it, and she straightened. holding it delicately between two fingers as if it were a dangerous relic. "I'll deliver this to my superiors," she said, her voice icy, "but you won't be coming with it. Turn back and leave our territory while you still can. This is your only warning." Ethan's expression hardened. He had done what he came to do, but leaving was not an option. "Do what you must, Commander," he said quietly, "but I'm not going anywhere. I'll be waiting here for your answer." Without another word, Lysara turned on her heel and strode back toward the base, the gate opening silently as she approached. Ethan watched her disappear into the shadows of the facility, the note still clutched in her hand. The doors slammed shut behind her, sealing him out. He was alone now, the oppressive silence of the desert pressing in around him. The weight of his mission settled heavily on his shoulders, and he knew the hardest part was yet to come. He only hoped that whatever the note contained, it would be enough to sway the Zanari High Council before it was too late. Lysara moved swiftly through the dimly lit corridors of the Zanari base, her boots echoing against the cold metal floors. The note seemed to hum with a strange energy in her hand, and despite herself, she felt an inexplicable urge to open it. Yet protocol demanded that any foreign material be inspected, reviewed, and destroyed if necessary. As she reached the security office, Lysara hesitated. She could simply hand the note over to Captain Nixel, her direct superior, and forget about the human who had left it behind. But something about the encounter had unsettled her. A look in the human's eyes, a conviction that she couldn't easily dismiss. Reluctantly, she unfolded the small piece of paper. Her eyes widened as she read the words inscribed on it, a chill running down her spine despite the desert heat still lingering in her armor. The message was brief, but its implications were staggering. "The traitor among you is closer than you think. Trust only those who know the prophecy of the twin suns. If you value the future of the Zanari, meet me at the northern perimeter tonight." Alone. Lysara's heart raced. The prophecy of the twin suns was an ancient Zanari secret, known only to the High Council and a select few trusted commanders. How could a human know about it? And what was the warning about a traitor? She knew what she had to do, even if it went against every protocol she had sworn to uphold. She folded the note carefully and tucked it inside her armor, her decision made. Tonight, she would meet him. Chapter 2. The Hidden Message. Night fell over the Zanari military base, casting a shadowy, silver-blue hue across the desert as the twin moons rose in unison, bathing the landscape in an ethereal glow. The temperature had dropped significantly, the heat of the day replaced by the biting chill of the desert night. Lysara, concealed in a cloak that shimmered with the same colors as the sand, moved silently along the perimeter of the base, heading northward as instructed by the cryptic note. As she neared the designated meeting point A, secluded section of the northern perimeter where the base's surveillance was at its weakest, she felt a knot of tension tightening in her stomach. She was going against everything she had been trained to do, everything she believed in. But the note's message, with its reference to the prophecy of the twin suns, haunted her. How could a human know about something so deeply hidden in Zanari history? Ethan was already waiting for her, leaning casually against a rock outcrop just outside the base's barrier field. He was still wearing his light reconnaissance armor, his face shadowed beneath the hood of a desert cloak. At the sight of her, he straightened and took a cautious step forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You came," he said, a hint of relief softening the tension in his features. "I came," Lysara replied curtly, keeping her hand close to the weapon strapped to her side. "Now talk, human. You have exactly 5 minutes before I decide whether to arrest you or shoot you." Ethan nodded, his expression growing serious. "I know you don't trust me, and I don't blame you. But what I have to tell you can't wait. The future of your people and mine depends on it." Lysara's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. She had already decided to let him speak, though every instinct screamed at her to end this madness and return to the safety of the base. "The note," Ethan began, his voice low and steady, mentioned the prophecy of the twin suns. "It's not something the Galactic Alliance should know about, I agree. But we do, because it's directly connected to what's happening within your own ranks." Lysara's posture remained stiff, her hand never leaving the hilt of her weapon. "You're speaking in riddles, human. Get to the point." Ethan took a deep breath, choosing his next words carefully. "There's a traitor within the Zanari High Council, Someone who plans to use ancient and forbidden technology to seize power. This technology? It's something that your people have kept hidden for centuries, ever since the prophecy was first recorded. If they succeed, it won't just threaten the Zanari. It will destabilize the entire region of space, leading to a war that neither of our species can afford. Lasara's face was an unreadable mask, but he noticed a flicker of doubt in her eyes. You expect me to believe this based on a few vague words in a note? You claim there's a traitor, but you have no proof. No evidence. Why should I trust you? Ethan didn't hesitate. He reached into a hidden pocket of his cloak and pulled out a small, black device, a hollow chip designed for secure communication. Because this, he said, holding it out for her to see, contains everything you need to know. Records of intercepted transmissions, coded messages between high-ranking Zanari officials, and evidence of their plans to activate the forbidden technology. All of it. Lasara's breath caught, but she remained wary. And why would a human soldier have access to this information? Because, he said, his voice suddenly raw with emotion, I was there when the first message was intercepted. My squad was stationed near the border of Zanari space when we picked up the signal. It was coded in a language no human should have understood. Except I did. It was a message about the prophecy, a prophecy that speaks of a time when the twin suns align, signaling the return of something or someone. Lasara's heart pounded in her chest, the mention of the prophecy sending chills down her spine. You're lying. You couldn't have been there. Ethan's gaze was steady, unflinching. I was. And when the Alliance learned what we had intercepted, they sent me to deliver a warning. Your High Council needs to know what's happening, but there are those among them who won't listen. Someone is blocking communication, suppressing the truth. Lasara's thoughts raced. This couldn't be true. It shouldn't be true. Yet the human's words rang with an authenticity she couldn't easily dismiss. She took the hollow chip from his hand, her fingers trembling despite her best efforts to appear composed. It was a risk, a betrayal of her duty to even consider his words, but something told her that she needed to see for herself. Give me time, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll verify this information. But if you're lying, if this is a trick, it's not, Ethan interrupted, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her uneasy. You'll see. Without another word, Lasara turned and disappeared into the darkness, the hollow chip clutched tightly in her hand. Ethan watched her go, feeling the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. Everything hinged on her next move. Back inside the base, Lasara retreated to her private quarters, her heart pounding. She activated the hollow chip, and a series of encrypted files began to play across the screen. At first, the data seemed like nothing but random sequences of code transmissions in a language she didn't recognize. But as the playback continued, her blood ran cold. The messages were unmistakable discussions of ancient relics, references to Zanari history that only those in the highest echelons would understand, and hints of a plan to activate a power source buried deep beneath the Zanari capital. The transmissions were fragmented, incomplete, but the warnings were clear. Something was about to happen, something that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. She sat back, stunned, her thoughts whirling in confusion. If this was true, then everything she had been taught about the High Council, about the Zanari's commitment to order and justice, was a lie. But how could she act on information provided by a human, an outsider? Lasara knew she couldn't go to Captain Nixel, not yet. He would dismiss it, just as he had dismissed the note. She needed more proof, something undeniable that could force the council to act. Her decision made, she hid the hollow chip in a secure compartment of her armor and prepared herself for what lay ahead. If there was a traitor within their ranks, she would find them. And if it meant working with a human to protect her people, then so be it. Chapter 3. Alliance or Betrayal. The Zanari military base, which had seemed so secure and invincible in the daylight, now loomed with a sense of ominous foreboding in the stillness of the night. Commander Lasara moved swiftly and quietly through the shadowed corridors, her mind a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The hollow chip's contents, so damning and impossible to ignore, had shaken her to the core. She had seen enough to know that Ethan's warning was real. There was a plot within the Zanari's own leadership. But uncovering the truth meant going against everything she stood for. She paused at a junction where the corridor split in 3 directions, glancing nervously at the security cameras mounted in the corners. She had disabled the feeds from her quarters, using her rank to cover her tracks, but it wouldn't be long before someone noticed. Every second counted. Her destination was the heart of the base, the Central Archives, a restricted area that only the highest-ranking officers could access. There, deep within layers of encryption and protected by the base's most advanced security systems, lay the records she needed. If there was any evidence to corroborate the information on Ethan's holochip, it would be there. Lasara's hand tightened around the access card hanging from her neck, the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. Betraying the trust of the Council, even temporarily, was a crime punishable by exile or worse. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that everything she knew, everything she had sworn to protect, was on the verge of collapse. She moved forward, her armored boots barely making a sound against the polished metal floor, and swiped her access card at the entrance to the archives. The heavy door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing rows upon rows of crystalline data storage units glowing softly in the darkness. Lasara entered, her fingers trembling as she locked the door behind her. She had no time to lose. She activated the terminal in the center of the room, her hands flying over the controls as she searched the archives for any reference to the terms in the intercepted transmissions, the prophecy of the twin suns, the ancient power source, anything that would confirm what she had seen. Minutes ticked by, each one more agonizing than the last. She was about to give up when her search results began to populate with restricted files, documents sealed away under the highest security clearance. Her heart pounded as she bypassed the security protocols, using codes known only to the top commanders. Finally, the files unlocked. Lasara's eyes widened as the data streamed before her schematics of a massive subterranean complex beneath the Zanari capital, hidden records of ancient experiments conducted long before she was born, and transmissions detailing the construction of an unknown device. The energy readings from the complex matched the readings referenced in Ethan's files, impossibly high, enough to power an entire fleet or to destroy a planet. This was it, the proof she needed. But before she could copy the files, the lights in the room flickered, and a warning siren blared through the corridors. Lasara froze, her blood turning to ice. The security feed had been restored, and she had been discovered. With no time to think, she grabbed a data crystal from the terminal and began copying the files. The door behind her rattled as the base's internal security systems tried to override her lockout. She knew she had only seconds. The download was nearly complete when a booming voice echoed through the room, cutting through the siren. "Commander Lasara, step away from the terminal and surrender yourself immediately." It was Captain Nixel's voice, cold and furious. "You are in direct violation of Zanari protocol." She didn't answer. The download completed, and she pulled the data crystal free, tucking it inside her armor just as the door burst open. A squad of heavily armed guards stormed into the room, weapons raised. Lasara's hand hovered over her energy blade, but she didn't draw it. Instead, she raised her arms slowly in surrender. "I can explain," she said calmly, her heart pounding. "Silence." Nixel snapped as he stepped into the room, his face twisted in rage. "You have betrayed the trust of the Council, Commander. You are under arrest." Lasara's mind raced, her eyes darting to the data terminal still displaying the damning evidence. "You don't understand," she said, her voice firm despite the panic rising within her. "There's a traitor among us, someone who intends to use the ancient technology buried beneath the capital. If we don't act, it will mean the end of everything we know." Nixel's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing to slits. "A traitor? You're the traitor, Lasara. Hand over the data crystal, and perhaps the Council will show you mercy." She didn't move. "I don't have time to convince you, Captain, but if you don't believe me, take a look at the files I've accessed. The truth is there." Nixel's lips curled into a sneer, and he gestured to his guards. "Seize her." Lasara's instincts took over. With a fluid motion, she disarmed the closest guard and activated her energy blade, its humming blue light casting an eerie glow over the room. The guards hesitated, clearly unwilling to engage one of the Zanari's most decorated commanders. Nixel's fury turned to shock as he took a step back. "Stand down," he barked, but Lasara was already moving, her blade a blur as she disabled the guards without lethal force. She knew she couldn't win this fight, not here, Not now, but she needed to get out with the data crystal. In a desperate move, she triggered an emergency power outage, plunging the entire base into darkness. Using her knowledge of the facility's layout, she activated her night vision and sprinted toward the nearest exit, leaving the stunned guards scrambling behind her. She barely made it to the perimeter when she heard the unmistakable sound of thrusters roaring overhead. Ethan's ship hovered above, its landing ramp open and ready. He must have seen the chaos on his scanners and moved to intercept her. With a final burst of speed, Lysara leapt onto the ramp, and the ship shot into the night sky, leaving the base far below. Inside the ship, she collapsed against the bulkhead, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Ethan was at the controls, his face tight with concentration as he piloted them away from Zanari territory at top speed. The weight of what she had done settled heavily on her shoulders. She was a fugitive now, a traitor in the eyes of her own people. But the data crystal in her armor was proof that she was right, and that knowledge was the only thing keeping her from despair. Ethan glanced back at her, his expression a mix of relief and concern. "Did you get it?" he asked, his voice tense. She nodded, holding up the data crystal. "I have everything we need. Now we just have to figure out what to do with it." Ethan's gaze softened, and he nodded. "We'll figure it out together," he said. "But for now, we need to get off this planet before they send the fleet after us." Lysara didn't argue. She strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, her mind still racing. They were in this together now, for better or worse, and the fate of two civilizations rested in their hands. As the ship shot away from the Zanari homeworld, disappearing into the endless void of space, Lysara knew that the real battle was just beginning. Chapter 4. The Shocking Truth Unveiled. The silence of space enveloped the small ship as it sped away from the Zanari homeworld. The only sounds the faint hum of the engines and the soft beeping of the navigation systems. Lysara sat rigid in the co-pilot's seat, staring out at the stars that seemed to blur as they picked up speed. Her thoughts were a tangled web of guilt, determination, and a growing sense of betrayal. Ethan's steady presence beside her, guiding the ship with a calmness that seemed almost unnatural, was the only thing grounding her. She took the data crystal from her armor and held it up, feeling its weight as if it carried the burden of the entire galaxy. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan glanced at her, his eyes shadowed with the strain of their escape. "First, we find a safe place to go through that data," he said. "Then we figure out how to make the High Council listen." Lysara's jaw tightened. "The Council will never listen. Not if they think I'm a traitor. The moment they realize I've gone rogue, they'll mobilize the fleet. We don't have much time." Ethan's expression hardened, and he turned his attention back to the controls. "Then we'll have to move fast. I know a place where we can lay low for a while, an old mining station on the far edge of the asteroid belt. It's abandoned, but the signal scramblers still work. We'll be safe there, for now." Lysara didn't respond, but her mind was already racing ahead. The real truth was on that data crystal, and if there was any hope of preventing a catastrophe, she would have to face the High Council, no matter the cost. But first, she needed to know exactly what she was dealing with. She needed to understand what the traitor's plan was, and why it involved the forbidden technology buried beneath the Zanari capital. Several hours later, the ship touched down on a desolate mining station, its dark, rusting bulk hidden within the depths of the asteroid belt. The station's automated systems flickered to life as they entered, providing just enough power to illuminate the main control room. Dust settled like a shroud over the ancient consoles, and the cold, metallic air made Lysara shiver despite the thermal protection of her armor. Ethan moved to one of the consoles and set up a portable decryption device, connecting it to the data crystal. Lysara watched as lines of code scrolled across the screen, her heart pounding with anticipation. Slowly, the encrypted files began to unravel, revealing their contents piece by piece. The first document was a series of old transmissions between members of the Zanari High Council. The conversations were cryptic, filled with references to the prophecy of the twin suns and the activation of a power source buried deep beneath the capital. It was clear that something had been hidden from the public, something dangerous, and someone among the council was pulling the strings. Then, the screen shifted to a series of schematics. Lysara's breath caught as she recognized the underground complex beneath the capital, but it was more than just a power source, it was a weapon. an ancient device of unimaginable power built by the Zanari's ancestors to defend their world in times of desperate need. The implications were staggering. If activated, the device could wipe out entire fleets or turn planets into wastelands. "By the stars," she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. "They're planning to use it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's why we intercepted those signals. They're preparing to activate the weapon, but they need a catalyst, a key. And from what I've gathered, that key has something to do with the prophecy." "The alignment of the twin suns," Lasara muttered, her mind racing as the pieces fell into place. "It's an event that only happens once every few millennia. It's supposed to signal the return of a great leader, a unifier for our people. But if the Council is trying to manipulate the prophecy to activate this weapon, they could control your entire species," Ethan finished grimly, "and anyone who opposes them would be wiped out." Lasara felt a cold dread settle over her. She had known that the Council was hiding something, but she had never imagined the extent of their deception. The data crystal confirmed everything. There was a conspiracy within the highest ranks of the Zanari, and it threatened not only her people but the entire balance of power in the galaxy. But one file remained encrypted, a single, highly classified document that resisted even the advanced decryption software Ethan had brought. He frowned, tapping at the controls. "This last file, it's heavily protected. Whoever locked it didn't want anyone to see it." Lasara's gaze was fixed on the screen. "Can you break through?" "It'll take some time," Ethan said, his fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. "But I think I can." Suddenly, a red alert flashed across the screen, and a sharp, piercing alarm echoed through the mining station. Lasara's heart lurched. "What is that?" Ethan's face was pale, his eyes wide with shock. "We've been tracked. They found us." Without warning, the entire station shuddered as an explosion rocked the outer hull. The console sparked, and the data stream cut off abruptly. Lasara didn't hesitate. She grabbed the data crystal, shoved it into a secure compartment in her armor, and pulled Ethan to his feet. "We need to get out of here," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the blaring alarms. They sprinted down the narrow corridors of the station, the lights flickering and dying as the power failed. Another explosion rattled the walls, and Lasara could feel the vibrations through the metal beneath her feet. The Zanari were coming for them, and they wouldn't stop until both of them were captured or killed. They barely made it to the ship when a volley of plasma fire streaked past them, narrowly missing Ethan's head. He stumbled, but Lasara yanked him inside, slamming the ramp shut as the engines roared to life. She jumped into the co-pilot seat, fingers flying over the controls as Ethan brought the ship's shields online. "Hold on," he yelled as the ship lurched off the station's deck and shot into the asteroid field. Lasara's hands gripped the console, her heart hammering as the Zanari pursuit ships closed in behind them, their weapons blazing. Ethan weaved between the tumbling asteroids, the ship's hull groaning under the strain of rapid evasive maneuvers. Lasara's eyes were fixed on the radar, watching the pursuit ships draw closer with each passing second. One lucky shot, and they'd be vaporized. "Do you trust me?" Ethan asked suddenly, his voice strained. Lasara's gaze snapped to his, her thoughts a blur of fear and adrenaline. She hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Yes." "Then get ready," he said, his fingers dancing over the control panel. "We're about to do something very, very stupid." He yanked the ship into a steep dive, heading straight for a dense cluster of asteroids. Lasara's breath caught in her throat as the rocks loomed larger on the view screen, but she didn't question his plan. She activated the ship's auxiliary thrusters, giving them a burst of speed just as they entered the asteroid field. The pursuing Zanari ships followed, their pilots too focused on their target to notice the trap Ethan had set. At the last possible moment, he veered sharply to the left, using the ship's maneuvering jets to slip through a narrow gap between two massive boulders. The lead pursuit ship wasn't so lucky. It slammed into the rock face, exploding in a brilliant flash of light. The remaining ships broke off, realizing too late that they had been outmaneuvered. Ethan didn't slow down, pushing the engines to their limit until they were clear of the asteroid belt and safely in the empty void of space. Lasara slumped back in her seat, her body shaking with relief. "We did it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We did," Ethan agreed, his expression weary but triumphant. But this isn't over. We still have the data crystal, and we still have to stop the council. Lysara's eyes burned with determination. We will. And this time, we're going to make them listen. As they set a course for neutral territory, where they could regroup and plan their next move, Lysara knew that the road ahead would be dangerous and uncertain. But for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. The truth was out there, and she would stop at nothing to see it revealed.